Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
And welcome into the Sunday Journal. I'm your host, Matt Fitta. Thanks for being with us today. We get together each week to talk about issues facing Cape Cod, the islands, and all of southeastern Massachusetts. Welcome into the program. Glad to have you with us today on this beautiful July weekend here on Cape Cod, across the Cape, the islands, and southeastern Massachusetts. Many times throughout the year you hear in our news coverage, we speak with the folks at AAA Northeast, the American Automobile Association, to talk about things that are happening around specific holidays, Memorial Day, July 4th weekend, Labor Day, even the Christmas holidays. We always like to get a handle on what's happening when it comes to travel, because we here on the Cape are so dependent on those of you who are visiting us this weekend, coming down here and spending your vacation time with us, but also the locals. We want to know the best things to know in terms of tips about getting around Cape Cod, and if we're going to be doing some travel as well. And really, the person who is really just the absolute expert now in New England on this, you've heard her many times on our newscast, is Mary Maguire with AAA Northeast now, right, Mary?
That's right.
AAA
yeah, we
Northeast.
changed our name. That's right. So we're AAA Northeast now.
And Mary is the Director of Public and Legislative Affairs and also the spokesperson here for AAA here in Northeast across our area. So, Mary, it's great to have you here in studio, and thanks so much for coming by. We can talk at length and not just have to work in our quick little sound bites.
I know. This is terrific, and so great to meet you in person, Matt. By the way, thanks so much for having me, and a beautiful day here on Cape Cod, so I really enjoyed the drive down.
We call them Chamber of Commerce days.
That's what this is. Picture perfect.
Exactly. Well, Mary, let's start out first of all. I thought today on our conversation we'd have a bit of a wide-ranging talk about travel trends, what's going on this summer here around the Cape and southeastern Mass and around the country as well. Many of our visitors listening to us today are here from other parts of the country as well, so I'm sure they will find it informative. So we'll start out generally with kind of a snapshot of what's happening in terms of the travel market, what's going on around the country right now. What are the trends that AAA sees?
Well, the trend for both Memorial Day and 4th of July was up. So increased numbers of people traveling, a significant number of people traveling in Massachusetts, more than 1 million people traveling in Massachusetts over those holiday weekends. And you just mentioned the fact that a lot of people are now traveling down to the Cape on Thursdays or early Friday morning. And so it seems like people are taking advantage of the great weather forecasts we've had on the weekend to do some 3-day weekends. And I was amazed actually at the amount of traffic I encountered driving down here this morning on a Thursday on Route 28. So, clearly people are taking advantage of good forecasts and much lower gasoline prices to do some day tripping, which is terrific. We're actually about $1 lower than we were at this time last year. And we're in the $2.70 range in Massachusetts this week, and we dropped 2 cents, in fact, according to our Monday survey. So when gas prices are falling, as they are this week, when gas prices are significantly lower, almost $1 lower than they were at this time last year, we see people really feeling empowered to do a lot of drive travel. And we've seen that in our holiday forecasts, a lot of people hitting the road.
There are a lot of options for people to get down here to the Cape. This year, JetBlue again resumed their service from New York. There's also an additional ferry service coming out of New York City over to the islands. There are a lot of ways for people to get around, but especially I think here for the Cape, we are still very strong, what they call, I guess, a drive market, that people come down here. It's an easy drive for a lot of areas. And the Chamber of Commerce tells us that, kind of our hot zones, Connecticut, New York, et cetera. So what are those, those travelers, what are they been seeing in terms of trends? What are they looking for at this time of year? We're kind of right in the middle of our summer season here on the Cape.
Well, I mean, they're certainly looking for good deals. They're saving money on gas, but hotel prices, according to our AAA survey, are actually up slightly. So they may encounter slightly higher hotel rates. I think the thing that I'm amazed about is how many options there are on the Cape. Not only are there so many diverse communities here on Cape Cod, and we've spent a lot of time over the years vacationing in South Dennis, in Mashpee, out in Wellfleet. I mean, there's a different feel to every community. But I'm also amazed at the fact that there are so many options when it comes to ferries to the islands as well. My daughter actually is spending the summer working out on Martha's Vineyard, and I'm amazed at the number of ferry options she has in terms of times. I'm amazed at the crowds that I see on the ferry because I've been out to visit her a time or two. So, I think people really have a lot of different options, and the key really is timing because, as you say, it's a drive destination. One of the things we advise people to do is to get gas before you get to Cape Cod because typically the prices for gasoline, the prices at the pump tend to be a little bit higher out here. We have a lot of tourists, as you say, coming in from Connecticut, New York, other areas. Connecticut, New York gasoline prices are far higher, so they may feel like they've got a bargain when they come to the Cape, but if you live in another part of Massachusetts, you don't necessarily feel that way. But what we talk about as most important is simply timing. I hit about a mile back up on the bridge this morning. I was surprised, but we all know, anybody who's spent time on Cape Cod, that a mile back up at the bridges is nothing. That's just a hiccup. It's those 5 and 7 and sometimes 14-mile backups that we really have to worry about. And I think the key thing is really to consult your favorite media channel or app and really check the traffic before you head out. And MassDOT has live traffic cameras on the bridges all summer. There are all sorts of tools that you can use to figure out what you're going to encounter when you head out on the roadway. And so we really advise people several things. Make sure your car has been tuned up. Make sure that you've checked your brakes, your tires are in good shape after the winter, that you've topped off your fluids, and that you're not going to encounter a mechanical obstacle on the way to the beach, number one. And make sure that you've got an emergency kit in your car. Jumper cables can really be a tremendous convenience when it comes to leaving your lights on by accident or something like that. Make sure you've got that kit with you, water bottles, and make sure that you've got not only the emergency cell phone, but also the charger for your cell phone, especially when it comes to your teenagers, your college kids. They always have their phone. They don't always have a charged cell phone. So, do some pre-planning and then set out on your journey to the Cape when the traffic is hopefully the lightest. We always recommend leaving early in the morning.
I have a friend who comes down often from the Western Mass area, and he always he'll leave, and I'll say, "Don't leave right now, don't leave for here," and he gets stuck in the traffic, and people get frustrated. But it's interesting that you point out that people just need to have a little bit of common sense, I think, in terms of thinking when they're going to come here, and then number 2 when they're going to leave. And you referred to the Thursday traffic, and we have absolutely seen over the past couple of years that Thursday almost has become the new Friday. You're going to see, even as we sit here during our taping, you're going to see even more traffic coming onto the Cape over the Bourne and Sagamore throughout the day and the evening. And then on Sunday, you do see that jam up in the afternoon. It seems as though that everybody heads off at the same time, which always kind of is interesting to me. I guess they all need to rush back to up to Wellesley and Lowell, wherever they're heading back over the weekends. But with that said, I sometimes wonder if those who are involved in the tourism industry, the hotel owners, etc., maybe they should have almost like a little incentive option that, if you can stay in your hotel room for, maybe $50 for the day and you don't have to check out till 6. Because I think maybe a lot of families get stuck in that situation where they have to check out of the cottage or the hotel by 11 o'clock. And then what do? You have a van full of screaming kids, and what are you going to do but get on the road, right?
Yeah, I've been there. I've got 3 kids who used to scream. They're older now, so I know exactly what that's like. And yeah, it sounds great to spend the day at the beach, but when you've got all your stuff in your car and you don't necessarily have a place to change and shower and all of that, it can be pretty difficult. Yeah. Although a lot of hotels, it seems, are now extending their stays where they say, feel free to stay and use the pool and the hot tub and the beach and the restrooms and all that you need. You just can't stay in the room. I've also noticed in my travels that hotels seem to be, as you mentioned, as you reference, a little bit more flexible about extended stays. And sometimes it really pays to ask. A lot of people don't want to make the ask, but when you make the ask, often they will extend checkout for 2 or 3 hours or even more. So I think it always pays to ask, especially if it's a place where you've stayed a number of times, where you have a relationship with the innkeeper or the hotel owner, or, you're a Marriott Rewards member or Holiday Inn, whatever, benefits or rewards program you might belong to. I think it's worth mentioning that as well, that you've been a good customer, a long-time customer, or perhaps a AAA member. And, that there might be a little bit of negotiation negotiating power there.
If you're just joining us today on the Sunday Journal, my guest is Mary Maguire with AAA of AAA Northeast. Mary is the Director of Public and Legislative Affairs for AAA, and of course they really are at the forefront of travel issues here across the region and across the country, and we're getting some advice and some tips as to what you should be thinking about here in the middle of the summer as we roll towards the end of July. Mary, I know that obviously we talk a lot with you about the travel issues specifically, but AAA has some other services available. Do you still do the triptychs, by the way? Remember the old triptychs?
We still do the triptychs. We absolutely do.
With all the technology, right?
Yeah. I work in Westwood, working actually a AAA branch outside of Boston, and the triptychs are rolling off the...
Still, huh?
Yeah, we do internet triptychs as well, so fewer of the paper variety for sure, but we still do them.
So what I wanted to ask you now is, what are the trends for the visitors that are coming here, number one, because we want to focus on the Cape and Islands. Where are they going? Where is the traveler getting their information? Is it all driven by technology now? What's happening when they make those travel decisions?
Well, I think people are doing a lot more research online, and I think they're looking at Yelp and other reviewing services to see what kind of reviews other travelers are making of various hotels, beaches, restaurants, etc. I think in particular with the millennials, that's a huge trend. They don't go anywhere that they don't research online and look for reviews and look to see how others' experiences have been. But we still pride ourselves at AAA on the fact that we do have our travel counselors who have traveled widely, most of them, and have a lot of tremendously detailed, rich experience about the places where they're sending their clients, their members. So I think that it always pays to have a relationship with the travel agent. We have situations, for example, we had some travelers in Greece recently, and they were concerned about whether or not they'd be able to get money. We're concerned about a possible emergency situation, but these folks were actually traveling with the tour group, and the tour operator knew exactly what to do, did a little bit of rerouting and a little bit of reorganizing, and they ended up having a fantastic time. So that's just one example, one sort of real-world current example of how things can change sometimes when you're traveling. And so if you have that relationship with your travel counselor, that person can assist you back at home.
I love technology. I like to think I'm pretty much on the cutting edge of all the travel apps, things like that. However, one thing that I think you have to be careful about, I'd like your thought on this, is you mentioned resources like Yelp and other types of apps and services where you can go and log on and see what other people have written. But I think you have to take all of that with a little bit of a grain of salt, because you don't know specifically what happened to that traveler. Did they have a bad experience? And I talk to a lot of owners down here, a lot of business owners down here in the restaurant business and in the retail business. And they can be honestly fearful of what can happen to them with Yelp. If one or two people have just a little bit of a bad experience, maybe they were busy that day and the waiter couldn't get over to them, and the next thing you know, Yelp is filling up with all these horrible comments. And then people go to Yelp and they automatically say, well, there's a bad comment there, I can't go to that one. I try to look at it and read through a lot of them, and you try to come up with a theme almost of what is the overall theme of what's going on. So what are your thoughts about just being cautious as a traveler, looking at these sites? They're very useful and a great resource, but not just completely relying on them.
Well, I think you raise an absolutely great point, because you don't know when someone simply has an axe to grind, for example, and they're going to use the internet as the place to do that. And I think that we have so many opportunities to do good research today because of the World Wide Web. So I certainly think it makes sense to do your research, but it also makes sense to have a relationship with that innkeeper you're talking about, with that restaurant owner, with your travel service counselor, so that you can really benefit from the expertise of somebody who has had the experience of staying at a certain hotel, or has eaten at this restaurant 10 times, or knows what to do, for example, if you end up in a situation where you require travel insurance. So I think that it's really a balance. I would say do your research online, but also take advantage of the fact that, for example, at AAA, we do have these tremendous travel service counselors who have been to so many spots in the world, who have stayed at so many of these hotels and eaten eaten at so many of these restaurants and gone on so many of these different tours. And I would say really try to balance your research with the real world experience and expertise that people you rely on have had.
Everybody wants a deal, Mary, when it comes to traveling. I do. I search multiple websites. I use some of those sites that aggregate everything, the Kayaks of the world, the Trivagos of the world. But give us some good advice if you can. Are there good times of the week to do your searching for travel? Some people say, well, search on Tuesday or search on Wednesday or search on Saturday at 12:52 in the morning. Is there any rhyme or reason to that?
Yeah, I'm not a travel expert. I work in public affairs, but I will tell you that I have heard a number of our travel counselors say that sometimes you can find a lower airfare on a Tuesday or Wednesday. Obviously, if you're willing to travel during off-peak times, for example, if you're willing to travel on Thanksgiving Day or Christmas Day, that's sometimes the best time to get where you're going very quickly and to save a lot of time in the process. People initially think, well, I might not want to do that. For example, waiting until Saturday morning sometimes to come down to the Cape very early in the morning can be a very good plan. But again, it depends on the flexibility you have in your schedule. But, we often tell people buy gas midweek. We see a lot of midweek gasoline deals for people who are traveling by car, terrific Tuesdays and wacky Wednesdays and that type of thing. So I think you're absolutely right that if you travel during off-peak hours, it's a good idea to begin with, less crowded, and you often will find a better deal. If you're able to travel last minute when it comes to flying, in many cases you'll be able to get a good deal flying last minute or flying standby. So there are, certainly ways in which you can save yourself money, and there are some terrific deals out there. We have a lot of discounts at AAA, too. Right now, a number of the parks, Canopy Lake Park, Six Flags, very popular, and we offer some significant discounts to AAA members at many of those parks. So, including Disney, by the way, we also have, park hopper discounts, et cetera. So, if you are a AAA member, take advantage of those discounts.
There are other discounts, too. I realized over in the dentist's office, you can get movie discount passes and everything. There's a lot you can get, actually, through the AAA service. We have just about a minute to go, Mary. So what's the advice? Let's say the family here on the Cape is thinking, you live here on the Cape, but let's say, well, I'm going to get off Cape for the weekend, and maybe head to Hampton or Newport or something like that. We have about 60 seconds here. What's the advice? Give them the advice to get ready for the weekend with the kids and pack the car. What should they be doing?
Leave today, if you can. Don't wait until Friday. Perhaps gas up your car off Cape. That may be less expensive, actually, for you. Pack plenty of patience. Allow extra time. If you got kids in the car, you want something to entertain them, like a game, like a DVD. Maybe they've got an iPad, whatever it is. You can play the license plate game if you want to do something old-fashioned, not electronic. And if you're flying, if you're headed to the airport, allow extra time. Security lines tend to be longer in the summer. We've got a lot of people projected to be flying this summer, so you want to make sure you allow extra time for that and get to the airport early because it's going to be very crowded.
Mary Maguire is the Director of Public and Legislative Affairs with AAA Northeast. Mary, thanks so much for coming in studio, and it's a pleasure to see you in person. And we'll be talking to you, I'm thinking on my calendar, probably Labor Day is the next time we'll probably check in with you for Labor Day travel. So we appreciate you coming by today.
Don't even talk about Labor Day. I don't want to think about the end of the summer, Matt.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the summer. Spend some time down here in the Cape, and we're glad to have you here. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it very much. And thanks for being with us today on this segment of the Sunday Journal. I'm your host, Matt Pitta.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.